You can't make someone change.
I felt like they were pushing me further away.
I don't believe it's wise to wait for someone.
Amber, thanks for joining us today on Slaying Sober. I'm really excited for today's conversation.
I love the name, Slaying Sober. I like it.
Yeah, it's my... Tell me about, was addiction around you at any stage of your life?
It is around me at every stage of my life, every
Yeah.
minute, everywhere. I grew up in a very addicted family. Grandparents, parents, step-parents, lots of those.
Yes.
Aunts, uncles, cousins, like everywhere. Like I don't have a single memory of my Mimi, who was wonderful, by the way, my grandmother,
Yeah.
without a glass of vodka in her hand. Like I have every memory, she has that. However, even though I grew up in a very addicted family, as in like my mom was doing meth with my sister addicted, I still feel like I had a fairly good childhood.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, a lot of people say, oh, well, that's why you got in the field. But it's really not, because
Okay.
when you grow up I didn't even realize that until I was in the field, that wasn't normal.
Mm,
As crazy as that
yeah.
is to say, isn't that wild? And then I'm
Yes.
looking back on it thinking, holy moly. Because when you grow up and it's just normal, like it's not like I didn't know people were doing substances, but I wouldn't have attached the word addiction to it. It wasn't a
Yeah.
word that was like bounced around.
Did you go down that path at all?
No, and I'll tell you why not. It's a little bit embarrassing. I think all kids rebel, in some ways. Well, when you come from a family where everything goes like that, I literally can remember thinking to myself, this is my rebellion. This is why it's embarrassing. It's like, I'm going to make good decisions, not like you guys,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
silly, which is ridiculous. And I wasn't
Well,
thinking that necessarily about substances. I was just thinking that about like life choices, like setting my life up right. And then, so
yeah.
there's that. And then there's when you live in it's not that glamorous. Like, it's
Yes.
not really that appealing when you're stepping over people passed out in the floor to go to your part-time job when you're 15. It doesn't even
Yeah.
look like it does on TV and commercials and stuff like that,
Yeah,
It just really
absolutely.
wasn't that
It's
appealing
really
to me.
it's really good to hear it from that perspective, because so often the people that I chat with have just followed down the path of, it's like generational misuse of substance, really, is
Mhm.
what often happens. And it's only now in recovery that they're looking back saying, I want to break that cycle. Okay, so you
Yeah.
did it the other way around, where you wanted to break the cycle and be the good girl early.
It's embarrassing. It's so lame.
No, it's good. It's cool.
It's another thing that doesn't help me in the street credibility department, I'll tell you.
Yeah, but lived experience comes in different ways,
Mhm.
and you seeing the arse end of how that looks and the depravity and the trauma that brings as well is well and truly lived experience in itself.
Yeah, and I think for me specifically, part of that lived experience that helps me now is that even though there was severe addiction going on, I still had a great mother. I still had a great Mimi.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think it gives me the ability to separate, yes, someone can have this problem, but it's not all of who they are. And it doesn't have to mean, what people think it means.
yeah. There was still love there.
But yeah, like I don't remember ever receiving any criticism. Now, it's kind of funny because I say I raised myself. My family would tell you I raised myself. They'd tell you I raised them,
Yeah,
which is true, but I was never criticized or told I couldn't do anything.
yeah,
And that
yeah.
means everything. My family didn't have a lot of financial support. I couldn't really rely on them to solve problems for me. But as far as helping me have a good sense of self-confidence, I think it was all there, and I'm grateful for it.
So you said you fell into addiction counselling, Amber.
Mhm.
How so?
Well, I initially went to school to be a teacher, a school teacher, and I taught for high school for like 3 years total, but after the first year, I decided I wanted to get my master's degree, and I was thinking I'd be a school counselor because I was in the school system, so it made sense. Well, I was in school, and then it came time to do an internship, and I couldn't afford to take off a whole school year to work for free as a school counselor, like, I was supporting myself, so I couldn't do that, so I changed my major at the last minute to community counseling so that I could do it in the summer, which would when I would be off anyways as a teacher, and, so I changed the major, and I asked one of my professors, "Hey, do you know anywhere I can get an internship?" And he gave me a person's name, and they threw me in this adult intensive outpatient program for chemical dependency. So
Wow.
that's where I did my internship, and because I had been a school teacher and I'd had, 5 minutes worth of experience watching someone else do adult chemical dependency outpatient, they decided that I was equipped to develop and run a IOP, an intensive outpatient program for addicted teenagers. So when
Wow.
I say I got thrown into the deep end of the ocean and over my head, I am not lying. If you can
Yeah.
deal with addicted teenagers, everything else from there is easy, if you ask me.
Yeah. Well, like you say,
That's
they
how I
don't
got
like
in
to
it.
be told what to do at the best of times, let alone when they've got a dependency on chemicals.
Right? And not only that, but it wasn't even an inpatient program. They wanted me to do intensive outpatient, which means these I had to get these teenagers to show up 3 times a week for 3-hour sessions, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 6 to 9 p.m. Just
Wow.
get that clearly did not want to be doing that.
Yeah. I can
So, it was a
imagine.
challenge, but that challenge taught me everything I know.
Beautiful. Tell me about your YouTube channel, Put the Shovel Down.
Mhm.
What does put the shovel down mean?
It's an old recovery saying, and actually one of the teenagers that I early on worked with, he used to say that all the time. He'd say, "You hit your bottom when you put your shovel down." So, in my mind, it means you don't have to lose everything. You don't have to keep digging. You don't have to burn every bridge. You can decide I've suffered enough and just drop the
Yeah.
shovel.
Yeah. How beautiful. And it's having a lot of success.
Mhm.
You've got a hell of an audience and a really wonderful brand around that.
Thank you. Yeah, I love it, and it's been a mission to build it. I tell you, I like to say getting people off of heroin is fairly simple and straightforward. Building a YouTube channel is rocket science. Like you have to have
Yeah.
so many skills. Oh my goodness! Like I had to really
Yep.
develop some new skills.
And you've got like a million, almost a million subscribers or heading that way. Like that's a huge, huge audience.
Yeah, I'm getting there. It was slow build, but you get momentum like a snowball. But it
Yeah.
took me a year to get like 100. It was
Yeah.
not easy. Yeah.
And what are the most rewarding parts of what you do online?
Well, um, just this week, I've been running a challenge called it's the Denial Breakthrough Challenge, where I teach people with functional alcoholic spouses how to get through to their denial and motivate them to change. And on Friday, we have what we call a family reunion. And so anybody that's been to any of the past challenges can come to it and we check in with them. And one of the women checked in and she said, she came to the challenge in January and she said, "I've been applying the techniques and you're not gonna believe what happened." And I was like, "What happened?" And even though that challenge was specifically for spouses, she came to help her son who was an alcoholic. And she said, "I've been doing all the things that you said to do, and the other day, my son just suddenly burst into this thing where he's like, I'm miserable. I hate my life. I'm scared to death I'm gonna kill somebody on the highway. I have to change." And then said exactly what he was gonna do to change, which is which is what we work on in there. How do we get it to come from the person? How do we get
Yes.
them to make the decision and want to change? Because it's true, they say you can't make someone change. Agreed, but you can make someone wanna change. And so that's what we were
Yeah.
working on, and it was so great, and she was like, that never would have happened had she not taken the challenge.
That's a beautiful way to sort of start to delve really into this conversation. I'd like some of our listeners to be able to take something away from this as
Mhm.
well. So tell me about, as an addict, what is going on in my mind?
When you're in the middle of active addiction, you have some people around you who are probably trying to talk sense into you. Probably your
Mm,
family members, right? Like your wife or your parent or your sister or somebody, somebody close to you. And what ends up happening is you end up in a power struggle with that person. And they're trying to get your attention and tell you you've got a problem and you're ruining your life and you're ruining their life and you're being a terrible person. And the more they do that, the more you get caught in self pity and resentment. And you're
yes.
focused on what they're doing wrong. And it's the biggest roadblock to recovery ever because addiction thrives on self pity and resentment. And if someone's playing the villain and they have this active villain role in your life, you're just going to focus on that forever. How they're in the
Yeah.
wrong. And even people that want to change get locked into a power struggle because they're in this like war with this person and they're just like, I'll just get drunk at you, you know? So
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
about
And I
untangling that
found like
dynamic.
found in my life that, this would often come up in arguments, ultimatums,
Mhm.
intervention, these sorts of
Mhm.
things. And I felt like they were pushing me further away from
Yes.
getting well into this deep spiral of shame and regret.
Yeah. Can I ask you about that? I don't know
Yeah,
how
of
open you
course.
Yeah, can you tell me about that? I'm interested.
Yeah, so I suppose my addiction began as a bit of a party boy where I would really enjoy myself, be the life of the party, be an enabler for other people. And until as the years progressed, became I became reliant on alcohol to
Uh-huh.
get through life. So
Uh-huh.
I needed it to then be able to go to a party. I felt like I needed it to be able to socialize. Then I would have these massive nights. And what would eventually happen is I'd wake up the next day in fear and shame and regret. And I would pick up the bottle earlier and earlier the next day to sort of numb that anxiety surrounding that. And then at my worst, it became a full dependency where it was going all the time,
Like a
that
hamster in
loop.
the wheel where just have to keep chasing it and you can't stop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what was your family or the people around you, how were they responding to that?
Yeah, anger, deep fear. I believe that they were protecting themselves in ways like all of that anger was a protection mechanism, like particularly with my wife and my children, because ultimately they were always loved. I was never violent, but it was an unsafe, unhappy, dysfunctional place to be.
Mhm. Yeah. And so they would get angry with you, and then what would happen? Like, what was the dynamic there?
I became more secretive in the way that I would consume.
Mhm.
So I would do it in places or away. I would either take myself away from the environment that I was in,
Mhm.
or I would create a micro environment, whether that's I'm out in the garden doing gardening,
Uh,
or I'm down in the shed doing
Classic. I'm in the
work, or
garage doing man stuff. Right, yeah.
yeah,
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 yeah.
like
Right, and that escalates it because when you have to sneak drink, you choose something that gets the job done quickly, and you have to guzzle it down,
yes,
and so then that
that's it.
dependency is now on a fast track. Like, it puts it on
Mm,
fire when you get in the sneak mode, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
I can relate to all of this.
Yeah, and then the cycle goes, and then they're frustrated, and then they get obsessed with finding you and finding the
Yeah,
evidence, and they get I call it, like, the CSI badge, like, they get a whole, like, investigator's
yeah.
degree, and then it's this cat mouse thing that's really hard to get people out of, and then you spend so much time trying to, like, get away with it that you don't even look at what's really happening.
Yes, and why I was doing it,
Right.
and I in the end, I convinced myself that I was really unhappy and that my life was no good and that I was unlovable and I wasn't having the life that I thought I would have, you know?
Right.
Despite on the outside having my own business, having a nice house, my kids were at private school, all of these things, but deep down in here and in here, I felt hopeless and I didn't
Mhm.
feel enough.
Yeah, miserable because even you can have that whole outside life going on, but when you're living like that, you have all this secrets, all this shame, all this guilt that if people really knew who I was, they wouldn't think highly of me. And it
Yeah.
just gets bigger and bigger, especially with alcohol.
Mm. And I still don't know, and maybe you could shed some light on this. Like, was that a moral deficiency or is it a disease?
It is, I would call it a disorder that
Yep.
creates a moral deficiency. So
Mm,
some people say, "Oh, you must lack character to do that or sneak around on your wife like that or something like that." That's not the case. Is as the addiction progresses, you will find yourself doing things progressively more so against your value system. I don't care who you are.
yes.
I don't care what your principles were. I don't care who you are. If you get somebody completely opioid dependent, they're going to steal to not be sick. Like
Yeah.
it creates a moral or spiritual deficit.
Yes. What about the chemical brain disease side of things? Do you delve into that world at all?
Yes, and that's a very interesting question because over my career, my thought process has kind of evolved with that.
Yeah.
People used to ask me to give the brain talk all the time, and I can do it. I can draw it on the board. I'm like super fabulous at giving this lecture about the brain changes and talking
Yeah.
about it being a disease. However, the longer I'm in it, the more I move away from that. Not that I don't think that all those brain changes happen. But
Mm,
but what I think is you're addicted for years, and that's what creates the brain changes, as opposed to the opposite way around. Like, most people think addiction is dependency, right? Like, when you have
yes.
to drink in the morning or whatever. But actually, you've been addicted for years to get yourself to the point where you have to drink in the morning. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? It's like you're doing it so often, so regularly that you've trained your brain to need it. And so
Mm,
that addiction, that preoccupation, that obsession is there long before the brain changes or the chemical dependency happens.
yeah. I've also heard of it referred to as dis-ease
Mhm.
rather than
I like
disease.
that. Yeah, no,
So
okay,
this
yeah.
the same word can be slightly represented in another way, and that is that I feel uneasy within
Right.
myself.
And I'm not opposed to the disease concept because it does something really helpful, which is it destigmatizes things. And so
Yes.
I am for it in that nature. But if I get super granule, and super
Mm,
like in my nerd brain to say, well, is it officially this? It doesn't even really matter. Honestly, it's like,
yes.
are you unhappy? And how do we get you out of it? That's really all that matters. But honestly, you know, people say it's a broken brain. And I'm like, not really. Our brains seek pleasure and avoid pain. And that's what you're doing in
Mm.
addiction. You're just confused about what's causing the pleasure and the pain.
Yeah. And similarly, like with labels of like some people, will like we identify in Narcotics Anonymous as an addict, in
Mhm.
Alcoholics Anonymous as an alcoholic. My drug of choice is alcohol, but I refer to myself as an addict. And that's probably because my addiction goes well and truly beyond substance. I am a flawed person who seeks pleasure above all else. But I'm working on trying to be better at that as well,
Well,
Amber.
let's talk about that because
Yeah,
this isn't a clinical term, right? But we are all familiar with the idea of like addicted personality, right?
yeah,
That kind of, and I think that's kind of what you're saying. I would definitely consider myself that, even though I don't have a chemical dependency. I do everything excessively. I obsess about
yeah,
everything. I spend too much money. I
yeah,
eat too much sugar. Like everything is over the top with me. So I am definitely an addict. I just didn't ever start drinking. um,
yeah,
but the way I see that, and I see so many people that have addictions that are like that, and I love alcoholics. Like, alcoholic businessman is my specialty. You know why? Because they're like actually by nature ambitious, outgoing, fairly charismatic. Like, they're awesome.
yep,
And I'm like, this isn't a
Thank you.
flaw. Yeah. I'm like, this isn't a flaw. This is a misuse of your superpower.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to get you to be balanced, and I'm not trying to get you to be this other person. I'm trying to get you to redirect that energy to something that makes you feel great about you and doesn't
Yes.
leave you feeling horrible about yourself.
Yeah. I think as well, like, I needed to educate myself. Like, we spoke about being spiritually unwell. Like,
Mhm.
part of my recovery is working on my spiritual self
Mhm.
because I've been so fast paced for 25 years. Yes, I can redirect that into starting a podcast, working harder on my
Mhm.
business, at times obsessing about going to the gym, but
Mhm.
also like it's pretty bloody good to like sit down quietly and like look at the trees
Mhm.
or meditate or read a book or go for a swim in the ocean, like all sorts of things that can slow down
Right.
my inner self, I suppose.
Right, it's only a superpower if you have some level of control over it, right? Like, if you're
Yeah.
Spider-Man, you need to be able to control your spider webs when they come out and when they don't, right? So, yeah, it's about
Yes.
gaining control of your superpower and directing it. And I think
Yeah.
that some of us are made that way because you have to be made that way to make great things happen. If you don't have an obsessive part of your brain, if you don't have this driven over the top part of your brain, then great whatever happen in the world. So it's like I was
Yes.
seeing, "Oh, these people are broken." I'm like, "No, these people are just they're just directed wrong, like, their superpowers in the wrong direction." Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, I really love that. So we spoke about how as an addict how we behave, and we spoke about our loved ones around us trying to help us. How do our loved ones help us in a nice gentle way to encourage us to get help?
This is a great question, and I get asked all the time, like, "How do I talk to my husband about his drinking?" And I say, "You don't. You talk to him about other things." And so, the first thing you have to do is get out of the bad guy role. Because as long as you're the villain, they're gonna be preoccupied with that, and that distracts them from looking at their own problem. And the reason I know
Yeah.
that is from 20 years of talking to people with addictions, if the family member's in a villain role, every week for an entire hour, that is all they're gonna talk to me about, and I promise you, I'm not gonna get them to talk to me about anything else other than my wife or
Mm,
my mom or my brother or whatever until
yeah.
that problem gets resolved. It's becomes a fixation because it's this power struggle that's, like, ever present between them and this other at least one main character in their family. Usually, there's more than one, but at least there's, like, a head leader one. There's, like, a main one.
Yeah.
It's, like, life mission is to, like, get you straight or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And so, you have to get out of that bad guy role first and foremost because and even if you do nothing else other than stop being the villain, the chances that this person will figure it out themselves go up astronomically, right? So
Yes.
so that's the first thing you gotta do. And then I teach some other techniques like I was telling you about the challenge, that we did this week. In that challenge, I teach some techniques like it might be your instinct to say to someone who's struggling, like someone in a situation like yourself and I don't know that much about your story, but it might be your wife's instinct to say something to you like, "Why are you doing this? Like, you're traumatizing our kids, like, you're setting a bad example." Say this to you, right? Thinking that if you
Yep.
could see how bad you're behaving, you would stop doing that. But it doesn't work
Mm,
that way.
yeah.
Anyone, you don't have to be an addict, you're gonna have defensive thoughts against that even if you know it's true. If you get
Yes.
called out for something, even if you 100% know you're in the wrong, you're gonna have defensive thoughts. And so when you say something like that to someone who has an addict, they're like, "Oh, well, you think you're perfect, or you think everything's because of my drinking, or you don't see any of the good things that I do." Those are the defensive thoughts. And so when you're
Mm,
making someone think that, they're convincing themselves more and more and more, keeping themselves in denial. Those are their rationalizations, those are their justifications, and you're literally triggering them out of their mouth and into their brain.
I pay this mortgage. I go
Yes.
to work every day. I take us on a holiday. I keep us financially stable. They
Right,
they
like,
were
I
my
make
things.
$200,000 a year. What do you mean I'm an alcoholic? And I have
Yeah.
people I see
Yeah.
that I call it that, like, run Ironman races, like, and own
Yeah.
companies. I'm like, they're very, like, functional and successful in a lot of, like,
I'm a
areas.
provider was a big one for
Right,
me.
exactly. And then it's like and then the thought is, well, you think everyone's alcoholic just because your brother was, right? You develop all these, like, defenses against that, which is keeping the person in denial. So instead of saying
Mm.
something like that, I say, find a moment when they're being a great father. Find a moment when they're doing something awesome and say, I have always respected this about you. You always make time for us. You always spend time with the kids. And it just makes me love you that much more. If you say that to someone, it reminds them of who they are and what their values are. And it brings that back to the top of their consciousness. And when they have moments where they're not living in congruence with that value, they're going to notice and they're going to want to fix that gap. It creates this gap of cognitive dissonance between who I am in my heart and who I want to be and how I am. And they'll connect the dots. And I tell them, you do not
Yeah,
connect the
brilliant.
dots for them. You can put some dots on the board, but you don't bring up the alcohol because as soon as you hint around it, the wall's going to come up. Like you can't even
Yeah.
get anywhere near talking about that. And so that's just one of the techniques that I teach is how do you get someone
And
to
also,
want to
like,
change?
this can be a happy place, you know?
Right. 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 And
It's
then
not
it's
all
like,
doom and gloom.
and then you start, like liking your wife and being attracted. And then you start thinking, holy shit, I'm going to lose her. I need to get my act together. As opposed to when they're on your case, secretly you're thinking, wish she would freaking leave. Or you're thinking, you know
Yeah.
what? Maybe I am just dragging my family down. Maybe I should leave. Because there's this secret
Yeah.
fantasy of if I didn't have her, I could be in a single life and I could drink like I want to drink. And so that's why I'm like, this ultimatum thing you got going on when you're the villain, that is not going to work because they secretly, they want out there, that alcoholism wants free reign. And so you can't set it up that way.
So can a partner or a loved one,
Mm-hmm.
what is the number one thing that they can do to try and maybe encourage their partner to seek rehab or professional help if the problem is that bad?
So and this is particularly the case with someone that's still functional, like, they're having a problem, a situation like you described. You don't have to tell someone how to get better. That's not the key. I've been doing this 20 years. I've never had to tell someone how to get better, ever.
Yeah.
Like, what the job is getting someone to want to get better. And then when you can do that, they'll figure it out. They'll find their way, and it'll
Yeah.
probably take some trial and error. And that's cool, right? You're probably going to do the bargaining, and you're going to try to cut it back, and you're going to try to just drink beer, and you're going to try to just do it on the weekends, and you're going to try to do all the things. And if the family member could understand that that's a really good sign, it means we're tracking to change, we're learning, we're figuring out how to solve this problem, then the family's less frustrated. If you see it as they don't get it, they're not really trying, they always make these promises, but they never keep them, they're just lying, then you're going to be frustrated. You're going to keep yourself in that bad guy cycle.
So does that work, incremental change, or do I need to go to rehab and completely become abstinent?
You need to figure out that you need to become abstinent. I don't know if you need to go to rehab. Some people do and some people don't. But you got to learn that because when it's addiction in and of itself means I can't moderate it consistently. Like you can
Mm,
moderate it sometimes, but you can't do it consistently. Like you might have 2 or 3 good days in a row and then it's just all hell breaks loose, right? And so
yeah.
the only way to get to the point of saying I need to let this thing that I really love go completely is to try all the other things first. So I see
Mm,
it like a checklist. I'm like, let's move through this checklist. Like, let's get it done because there's no way to get from here to here without trial and error, right?
yeah.
You can't skip it, but you can help speed it up in someone.
Because I tried everything.
Of
At
course,
first,
right.
when I first went to AA, I went in there and said, I'm James, I drink too much.
Uh-huh.
And then I would only drink light beer for a
Uh-huh.
while.
Uh-huh.
And it's amazing. Like if you drink 35 light beers, Amber, you can still end up quite pissed. And you wet the bed as well.
Right.
Or I won't drink wine or I won't drink, neat liquor,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. Like I won't drink at home or all these sorts of things, but ultimately none of them work
Right. But it's
until,
important for people to go through that process.
Yes. Yeah.
Right, and
Well,
so
it was part
yeah,
of my
it's
story,
part
yeah.
of your change process, and it didn't mean you weren't trying, it means you are trying to figure it out, and
Yes.
that's what I mean when I say if you can help motivate someone to wanna change the problem, they will find a solution, which is
Mm,
they'll figure out that they need to give it up completely, right? But
yeah.
you have to, like, let them move through the process and don't do this giant power struggle, and we'll move through it a lot faster. You know, when they say,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna drink more than 3 ever on a weeknight," you say, "Honey, I think that'd be great. Let's do that," right? And then when they fail at that, which they will, then you have empathy
Mm,
for them
yeah.
instead of saying,
Yeah.
"You promised." And if I were talking to, like, somebody's wife or something, I would say, for God's sake, whatever you do, do not help make sure that they stay within that limit. Like, do not go and
Mm,
police and take it out their hand and pour it down because the worst thing possible is that they'll stay within that limit because now we're convinced they can do that. I'm like, and then you're slowing the whole thing down. So don't help them, right?
yeah.
Like let it flow, let it go naturally. Hopefully it goes quick. We
Yeah.
can check that one off and move to the next one.
It's such a patient, game, I suppose, being the partner or loved one of someone in addiction.
Mhm.
They're the real heroes in this story, the survivors
Right.
and the helpers. And how do they look after themselves from a mental health perspective?
Well, just like the person with the addiction has to figure out how to overcome their obsession, they have to figure out how to overcome their obsession with you. So you're addicted to whatever you're addicted to, and they're addicted to you. And they get caught up in
Yeah.
trying to catch you all the time. And then they catch you, and then you lie to them and you gaslight them. And now they're just trying to prove that they knew it all the time. And they think if they collect enough evidence, you're going to admit it, whatever. And so
Mm,
they have to stop feeding that obsession, right? So we're
yep.
going to stop spying. We're going to stop counting. We're going to stop looking at the bank account. We're going to stop following them on the GPS and the monitors and the tape recorders you put in their pocket and all the things you're doing and driving by the meeting, make sure they're there, whatever. We're going to stop doing that
Yeah.
because it's keeping them addicted, keeping them sick, right? And
Yes.
and guess what we're going to do? Like
What's that?
life things that they want to do. They can go back, take that
Yeah.
yoga class or knitting class or whatever it is they wanna do to start getting their life back and their sense back. So it's
Yes.
really like the same process. Like, I'm gonna have to change my people, places, things. They're gonna have to get out of those patterns and stop feeding their own obsession so that they can be
100%.
emotionally stable enough to pull off what I'm telling them to pull off because everything I teach them is very difficult. The techniques are simple, but it's emotionally difficult because it's counter your
Yeah,
instincts, right? But it
absolutely.
requires strategy. Like I teach
Mm,
families, I'm like, "Stop talking to them about how you feel. That's not gonna make them wanna change, that makes them wanna not be around you. Start talking to them about how they feel. Get them to talk about how they're miserable, how they're mad at themselves. Like, just sit there and listen and be the sounding board, and they'll talk themselves right out of it. It's just a
yeah.
shift."
And you need to fill your own bucket first
Mhm.
to be able to help other people as well. Like if you are completely have an energy deficit, it's impossible to help your partner and your loved ones around you as well. It's just too hard.
Right, because you won't be consistent, you'll use the
Yes.
strategies today, and then you'll just lose your cool tomorrow. Even though you knew it was gonna happen, you still lose it. Right, you have to do that, and another thing that's helpful for that is changing their people, places, and things, because they're probably getting information and advice from friends or family members or, I don't know, support groups or something like that, that's sort of this, like, I don't know why you're putting up with that crap. You should get out of there, and then they're feeling
It's
guilty if
advice
they
down the
stay
bar, Amber, that they're getting from the bloke at the end of the bar.
right.
Why are you putting up with that crap? Stay here with us, you know?
Even people in recovery, like, people
Yeah.
in recovery will advise family members to do this. They're the worst ones. They'll say, "Oh, kick his ass out." Like, "Okay, okay." Um, they're getting all
And
this
it's funny,
advice, and
like,
then they feel guilty for staying. and they feel guilty for
Yes.
going, and they're trapped, and no one's really helping them to, like, solve this problem, and so you have to, like, protect your own sanity by choosing very carefully who you speak to about the problem.
Outside of my addiction, as I started to get well myself, an example of what we've just been talking about is how I'm able to show up now for my children. So
Mhm,
I've got a 12-year-old and an 11-year-old, and they're
mhm,
in that age where, they're starting to navigate some of the challenges of being an early teen,
mhm,
and I just would have never been able to help them on an emotional level like I can now. I'm able to sit back, I'm able to help them navigate it because they need to navigate it themselves, but
mhm,
I'm able to sit back um, with from a sense of serenity and peace
mhm.
to help them navigate the world a little bit better now.
Yes, absolutely, and so that's why I say it's worth it, you know? The best possible
Yeah,
outcome is for the family to find recovery because all the other outcomes pretty much suck.
yeah.
Like, you can
So how do
divorce them, but that's gonna
families
suck because then you're still sharing kids with them. Like, there's not another good solution. There are other solutions, but they're not really appealing. Yeah,
Yeah. So can families heal?
absolutely. I see people heal all the time, and I see people recover left and right, and so I hate all these, like, numbers you hear, 1 in 10 people get sober. I'm like, "That's ridiculous." Now, if you surveyed people coming out of a treatment center a year later, maybe 1 in 10, whatever, but, like, that's because it takes people multiple times to get sober. So maybe you didn't get sober the first time you went to that treatment center, but maybe the third, like, they're not taking into
Yes.
account this process of how people get there. Right?
Yeah.
So in the 10,
Numbers can be
eventually how many
manipulated.
of those people eventually figure it out, the numbers are different. And if the family
Yeah.
knows what they're doing, the numbers are real different.
Mm. And does that look like forgiveness?
I don't really think it's so much forgiveness at first, I think it's a strategy. I think it's a decision that you make. Here's what I'm gonna do. Here's how I'm gonna interact with that. I call it strategic empathy. Regular empathy is like, I feel what they feel, right? And I feel bad because they feel bad. Okay. When your loved one's going through this, you don't have empathy for them because they're freaking making you mad. You're mad, right? So
Yeah.
this is called strategic empathy. It comes from a logical place in your brain, not in your heart. Okay. This is a strategy of this is what I'm doing, and this is why I'm doing it. And the more you do that, they'll change the way they're interacting with you very quickly. Like, if you use my strategies, your person may not get sober tomorrow, but they're gonna react to you different tomorrow, like, immediately, and that's gonna get better, and then the sobriety comes. And so, the forgiveness comes then because now you're treating each other with dignity and respect, and you're having more emotional safety as you figure this thing out, and then the trust naturally builds itself. So it's a
Yeah.
decision. It's like when you get sober, it's a decision that you make. You didn't
Mm.
feel like, "I don't wanna drink anymore." You felt like
Mm.
you're in a rock and a hard place, and right now, this is the better solution, right? Like, that's why people do it, and so, eventually and then it gets in your heart later on, right? Like, first you're just
Yes.
doing it for whatever reasons, and there's no bad reasons in my book. So and then the heart shift happens.
Do you believe in the concept of a rock bottom?
I don't believe it's wise to wait for rock bottom. I think
Yeah.
most people sort of skip along the bottom, and I think that there have to be enough consequences so that the scale is tipped, the pros and cons, right? Like, it has to be causing more uncomfortableness than it's help than benefit, right? You're not gonna get anywhere if the scale isn't tipped yet, right? Like, if you're still dealing with somebody
Yeah.
in college or something that's drinking, it's gonna be hard because that scale isn't tipped yet. But, this idea of rock bottom is dangerous because what family members think is that they need to create this rock bottom by making your life harder, by throwing you out. The thing of it is making someone homeless is not going to make them sober. Making someone homeless is going to increase whatever they're doing. They're going to be doing a lot. That's the whole thing with addiction is it continues despite the consequences. So this idea of if I make someone suffer enough, they're gonna figure this out and wise up it's not quite accurate. Because when
Yes.
someone has too many consequences, it's really hard to come back from. Like, once someone really is homeless, they get comfortable with it. Like, they literally it becomes their norm and they get used to it, and it's really not impossible, but it's really hard. Once someone's been to prison and then it's on their record and they can't get a job, they can come back from it, but it's a lot harder. Once someone loses their children, it's a lot harder to be motivated to change. So, it's like you need this balance of uncomfortableness.
Yeah.
Right? But
And
once
you're
it tips it to
saying
the extreme, it's harder to bring someone back from.
it can be arrested before we need to lose everything.
Right, because, you've heard the term, like, "raise the bottom."
Yeah.
That's sort of what my work is trying to do, is raise the bottom, because you can get people to see what's happening so much faster and get that clarity and that insight and that desire to change right here in, like, this level 3 uncomfortableness, instead of waiting until I mean, people don't drink less when their wife leaves, okay? They drink a lot more, and they really feel sorry for themselves, and they're really mad at that bee, and that's just more
Yeah.
reason to like, I'm serious, like, so
Yeah,
I
yeah,
say there are
100%.
reasons why you not need to put an addict out of your house, very legitimate reasons, but the reason shouldn't be that you think if I put them out, they're gonna learn a lesson and
Mm.
stop.
Yeah, because rock bottom,
Mhm.
as we know as well, has got a basement. And really, like, the ultimate rock bottom is death, probably.
Right. Like, I used to work, in detox, which I say is like addiction
Mm.
counselor hell. You're thinking, "I went to school for this, these people aren't even awake talking to me." Like, it's, like, terrible. Anyways,
Yeah.
I used to run these groups in detox, and, I would ask the group, I would say, "I want everyone here to think about the worst thing you ever did, the biggest regret, the worst thing you ever did, ever happened to you related to your addiction." I was like, "I'm not gonna make you say it, I just want you to conjure it up in your brain." And so I let
Yeah.
them do that, and then I say, "Now raise your hand if you use after that." And every hand in the room goes up,
Yeah.
right? Now,
Yeah.
those little moments where something bad happens create these little moments of clarity, right? So it's like I got
Mhm.
wasted, I embarrassed myself again. That next morning, I wake up and I start making myself promises or whatever I'm doing. So those little hard moments will create little openings, but they don't make
Yes.
you sober. Those little openings can last anywhere from a couple of hours to, like, 3 days max if you don't take action within that window. If you don't start
Yeah.
actively, like, deciding how you're gonna not drink or how you're gonna make this change and putting some things in process. So, I do think that those low moments are helpful, but they don't have to be super severe for a lot of cases.
What I'm hearing from our discussion today as we sort of start to wind up is that if, as a loved one, we have empathy and kindness and a strategy around the way that we deal with our loved ones, is that life can get better.
Right. And let me add this one piece in, because now you're saying the formula, and I'm like, I forgot to tell you an important piece. So the other
Yeah.
important piece is you have to let the natural consequences fall. So what most families do is they're trying to fix all these messes that the person's creating for themselves, and they're just being mad at the person inside the relationship and telling them how they're screwing it up and how they're having to remortgage the house to pay for the lawyer, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I need you to shift that. I need you to let those natural consequences happen as they're going to happen. And then you be the empathetic one on the inside. So it's not just a matter of treating them nice. It's a formula that allows people to see the truth, that allows people to see where the pleasure and where the pain is really coming from. It just gives more clarity. So it's like, stop fixing everything and then stop being the villain so your person can see what's really happening. So someone in our challenge this week was saying, their husband drinks every night, and he does the typical thing, which is waits for them to go to bed so he can, like, be alone and then really drink, right? And he ends up, which is, like,
Yeah.
super common. And then he ends up drinking, and then he falls asleep, and then he has, like, the glass of alcohol, and then there's, like, cans on the floor or whatever when the kids get up. Well, previously, this wife had said, "You're not allowed to drink in the house. This is bad influence for the kids, blah, 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 blah." And when she would wake up before the kids would get up to make sure to clean up all that mess so the kids wouldn't see it, which sounds good on the surface, right? And I'm like, "No, you need to let him wake up with the glass half spilled all over himself and his kids in there." I mean, seeing that's not great for the kids, but it's not, like, abusive, like, and let him feel that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And don't be mean to him, right? This is the formula. It's like you gotta let their own guilt and uncomfortableness rise to the surface. If you cause the consequence, that's called a punishment, and punishment just breeds resentments, not change.
Yes. Yeah, because growth is in discomfort.
Mhm, mhm.
Amazing. I've really loved today, Amber. Where can my listeners find your information? Because I'm sure that others will really want to delve in and seek your assistance.
Sure. The best place to find me is on YouTube, and the channel is Put the Shovel Down. And you can, if you're more of a podcast like an auto listener, you can find it. It's called Inside the Mind of an Addict.
That's amazing. Well, I'll definitely be tuning in and I'll leave all of your details in the show notes for this. Um, Thanks so much for your time today, Amber. I'm really grateful and I'm sure this will help many people down here in Australia listening.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and help letting me like spread this information. I appreciate it.
It's really important. You're doing amazing. God's work. Thanks, Amber.
All right.